Hey everyone, this is your favorite friend Jay, and today I'm so excited to introduce to you a new face that I found on Instagram as I was going through my journey discovering elements of film and what makes a film shine. Emily Winokur is a costume designer that I discovered throughout my journey of interviewing and talking to other costume designers. And Emily is someone who is very vibrant and who has a lot of color on her Instagram, also a lot of projects to her name. So I'm just going to start by asking Emily, how are you doing, Emily?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you too. So let me start by asking you, what made you feel like you want to be a costume designer? When was this moment?
I was very lucky and I discovered costume design at a very young age. I was in high school when I first realized that my all of my favorite things, which was art, history, fashion, and theater, could all be combined into one career field. So I've been, you know, pursuing this for quite some time.
Okay, so designing for musicals, is it as, like as complicated as it seems? Like you have a lot of costumes, you have many performers, you have many, like background actors, and then you have the centerfold leads. So is it as complex, or maybe because you're part of a team, things don't seem as hard as I have in mind?
Designing for a musical is a very different beast than film, which is what I focus on now. But I did start in theater, and it's just an entirely different approach and process for designing. You end up building it more chronologically, and you kind of paint in a different way with clothing with theater. It ends up being my textile choices end up being a bit louder and a bit more exaggerated sometimes. Literally, there's just more theatricality with theater and musicals. Then in film, I end up using a much more subdued and more subtle effects and choices. Something very small goes a lot I'm kind of choose either. There's again, they're just so different. I definitely am pursuing primarily film these days. There's just a lot more longevity in it, and there's a lot more financial stability. Totally. As a young child, I really loved Marvel. Minions was one that I really spoke to. Anything that had slight fantasy to it, but still kind of living in non-realistic worlds, if that makes sense. I really anything that was fantastical, I really enjoyed. I really thought that was really good. Had a lot of influence. Very other recruiters with theater. That's why I really started making what possible going to theater and some puppet shows. To get storytelling, you can tell stories through clothing.
That's wonderful. So, do you think costumes tell a story in a way that, like without the costume element, it would feel a little bit bland, a little bit bleak, or just, like neutral in a way? So, how do you, as a costume designer, working with the actors or with the director, create this story together?
It's a very collaborative effort for sure. Telling the story between working with the director, the writers, and also the producers, because ultimately they have a lot of opinions on where they want the story to go and how it to be presented. I mean, that's something that I really enjoy the most of, is the collaborative storytelling aspect of it. I always say that if I didn't necessarily want to tell stories, I would be going into fashion design Fashion design is storytelling, but in a very different way that's not as collaborative through with a storytelling prompt, as you will, with like a writers or again with the directors and whatnot.
I found on your Instagram this sentence. It always starts with color. It's the color for me. So
Yeah,
does it start with color? Like you're given this job, costume design. Does it start with color or with the texture or the fabric? I just want you to get me through the process.
totally. Color is very important for me, be it in theater or in film. It really does. You can overall group and paint every frame, if you will, with color palette, working with like, you know, the lighting designer, production designer, and really create different groupings and different hints and different colors kind of per se, different moods and different, you know, hints as to where which characters may be connected later on in the story. I do a lot of that. I enjoy connecting multiple characters through different uses of color, and that's something that is consistent through all my work for sure.
Yeah. And from what you described, I could envision this contrast, and I could see many movies that I've witnessed this in, which brings me to Intern, which is an amazing
Mhm.
piece, really an amazing commentary on corporate life, on white collars, claustrophobia of, like locked offices. So what I want to tell you is, how did you get the inspiration? Because first of all, the set design blended perfectly with the costumes. So how did you get this inspiration to create the world in which people were set pieces too, part of the chessboard?
Oh yes, I love that reference, the chessboard.
Thank you.
Um, I worked very directly with Alana, the director. She approached me with a really lovely pitch board of where she wanted to take the film. And I really just kind of elaborated on that. She had this wonderful take of the open space being, you know, much more earthy and grounded and muted, but also kind of stuffy. Whereas in the world of like the CEO, having this be a much more, I found it more metallic and slick and cold, and you know really trying to focus on the differentiation between those two was really interesting for me.
Definitely. And I also wanted to ask you, like, because the main protagonist, Seth, the shirt and the tie had an interesting twist to them. So
Yeah,
I really love this so much. So how did you come up with this detail?
yes, I like that you noticed that. You know, I really tried to lean into this concept of he has a collage of different time periods were represented, and for just Seth specifically, it just the print itself, we wanted to kind of note a more naive and young and youthful kind of playfulness with the print. None of the other characters had that print. Everyone else, if they had any interest on their color or on their clothing, it was a stripe, something that was very rigid, very uniformal, very straight lined, where he had a little bit more youth and just joy that he brought to the office. Also, just the fit itself. I pulled from a multiple time periods for him specifically. As an intern, you know, he had he may not have he did not have the same wealth and same fit that the CEOs and the other people who worked in the CEO world, or even in the open space office, because he was an intern and he pulled his wardrobe from uh, his family's closet, from relatives that he just kind of pulled together, uh, like a more of a 90s blazer, but then more of a 70s top with like a 60s tie. And it kind of created this really kind of unique and absurdist kind of look for him, that I also think it played into his youthfulness. And that was really interesting for me to kind of bounce in the fitting room, working with the actor on like kind of creating this character.
And it really showed his naivete too. Like it was so innocent and so lovely to watch, which is what I'm gonna ask you is when you have this yellowy, dusty filter encompassing, like the downward offices or the open space offices or whatever, how do you make a costume? Because the costume attracted my attention. Although sometimes when there is this yellow filter, you're just like, okay, I feel like people are just kind of like under a sandstorm of sorts, but still you made it shine. You made the character shine despite all the haze and all the gloom of it. How do you do this? How do you achieve this?
Oh goodness, thank you. I really, I worked with a production designer, and I kept pulling from also all of this artwork and this graphicness with this scenery, and just like the environment itself. And I found that there was a lot of different textures in the open space, because there was, with the posters themselves, and then like with the office, like just like the muskiness of it all. It kind of helped and allowed for me to kind of play with these different silhouettes and uh, within this overall work encompassing like business attire, business wear, with like these blazers and ties, and like making sure that I wanted to create this world that the viewer could understand could exist, but there was still something slightly off-putting and slightly different than, just a modern office. There really was no timeline set as to when it was really happening. For Seth's open space young look, specifically, I think I styled and chose um, individual pieces that had very strong silhouettes to themselves individually, be it the pants, even the slacks. They were a very crisp 80s, but it was a wool pant, a wool slack. So it had that kind of over that musky texture that kind of made it a little bit fuzzy and played to the nature of the space. But the sharpness lines of the crease front, pleat front, and then the fact that they were actually quite short on him kind of created this playfulness that made him kind of stand out and pop. And the DP was so great about getting a couple of shots where we did actually see Seth full body, and you can kind of get that full overall silhouette, which was really fun. Also the same thing with like the 70s collar, or the shirt that we went with was 70s. So it had this really strong collar to it, which really became stiff and sharp. And it created this really almost uh, caricatureness between his neck and his face, because the collar was a little bit too big for him. But it emphasized onto the naivety and youth of the role. Whereas the same actor later on, when he was playing the head of department, uh, he did wear a much more well-fitted uh, collared shirt and well-tailored suit, that kind of showed that kind of assimilation into the CEO world. Whereas um, back in when the open space starting out as an intern, his silhouettes were a much more angular, sharp, tailored look. Um, but the tailorness of it all was not fit, if that makes sense. It was a tailored shape and created a style, but it wasn't necessarily tailored for him. It was tailored from whomever he borrowed the garment from.
Wonderful. And this is in contrast to the CEO, in which I felt that the shades of the colors chosen were perfect. So how did you manifest this look?
Yes. Well, I worked with the production designer, and the other artists on the film, and they were doing this customized painting portrait, that kind of really drew it in. I mean, it was as you saw, a very minimalistic set, which really helped to like just the energy in the room. It was just very stark, and like almost the air that they breathed kind of was sharp. The air was sharp. And I kind of reflected that in with the men and the characters in that scene. And the CEO specifically, I wanted to make sure he had like a three-piece suit. He was very uh, old school class, and an old school, very well fit, very well tailored to the T, complete with his little pinky ring, down to the T, very cold and blue. I really leaned into this blue world with them because the blue lends to metallic and to also ice, like an ice kind of an iciness to it all.
Definitely.
Um, Whereas we didn't have any of the blue hardly at all in the open space, save for the few characters that we were kind of connecting between the two worlds.
Definitely. You gave me the vibes of the Sterling Co., like the Sterling Co. in Mad Men, especially when we went to the CEO. I felt like, wow, the chicness of it all. Awesome.
Hmm.
It was an amazing choice overall. So, what I want to ask you is let me take you back in time to the first time you saw yourself credited as an assistant costume designer, winning time, the rise of the Lakers dynasty. How did it feel and how did you get this job?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, that was one of my favorite projects to have worked on. I love the 70s. 70s period to dress is so fun for me. I, and winning time was an absolute dream position for me. I did episode 6 through 10 of season one. And believe it or not, I just responded to a posting on a Facebook group that's the main spot kind of where all the freelance is through Facebook, believe it or not. And I just submitted my resume, my portfolio, and it was kind of a cold call, and it went really well. I came in, did 6 months with them, and it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
Definitely. And is it easy to find like a reference, a direct reference for the costume job, or is it more difficult? Like if you're doing a show in the 70s, but you don't have the real life evidence or the real life footage, is it easier?
Um, I think it is easier if there is not the real life footage. That was something that I found to be such a big challenge. The biggest challenge with winning time. The biggest challenge with winning time was we were recreating looks and changes, like costume changes for real, like we were recreating videoed, like monitored uh things. We like there's actual footage of the basketball games, right? So we're trying to recreate looks that have already been fully realized in news. Like there's a lot of like news reportage footage and a lot of like coverage of like incidents that were real time recorded. So that was very interesting that it was a period film, or there was a period series, but we also had to create, like, recreate real looks. Um, so that was definitely more challenging than, uh, say, just getting something that's all fiction and there's no video to recreate. Like, it's so much easier to just go shopping for a vintage dress rather than trying to hunt down the exact vintage dress that was already established.
Definitely. So when I was talking to costume designer Whitney Ann Adams, she told me about how photos, multiple photos inspire her. I want to know what inspires you? Like, do you take multiple photos? Do you go to museums? Do you paint? Do you just merge colors together and discover what the resulting color would be? What is the inspiration for Emily?
For me, just personally, I love just going to museums. You definitely said it there. I love going to museums and I love going to like nature walks. I find a lot of inspiration through nature itself. As I have so many photos on my phone of just like bark off trees. I think bark is just so interesting textures. Like I respond really well to different textures and different colors in general. But so when I'm on nature walks, I have a dog. So whenever I'm like on hikes or, just out in my backyard and my garden, flowers, just anything that's really organic and highly saturated, I get really inspired by.
Wonderful. So, do you have a big ambition or dream that you want to achieve as a costume designer?
I mean, I would absolutely love to have longevity. I think that's my dream. I would love to be able to have a series or a dream project of mine would be able to do any type of episodic that encompasses multiple time frames, like time periods. I think a lot of costume designers could reference this specifically with Mad Men as being probably one of the most beautifully done of showcasing, that where we started and then where we ended in that series, and just being able to uh, not just tell stories with individual characters, but see how those characters evolve and where they've gone through in their style evolution is really interesting for me. So anytime that I'm able to uh, do that kind of evolving with a character's personal style is my sweet spot for sure.
Definitely, I can see you doing this anytime soon. Seriously, Emily, it was amazing talking to you and seeing your process and getting through your world. And I'm so honored, really, that you agreed to talk with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great meeting you and talking about this. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you tune in to Intern. I'll post the link of all the awards that it got. And if there is any screening anytime soon, Emily, please just send me a link or something just to notify people.
Yes, for sure. Will do.
Definitely. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.